My name is Karen Hatcher, and I am the new chapter host of Drinking Liberally. And you're thinking, what is that? So back in 2003, a group of New Yorkers got together, they were youngish, and they were unhappy with what was going on in the Bush administration, which I now find rather benign, but they decided they needed a place to gather. They wanted to talk, vent, encourage, and drink. So they started a national organization called Drinking Liberally. In 2009, Windsor's own chapter came into being. And for many years, it was a very active group. As a matter of fact, our very own Judy, who had moved here from Granby or East Granby? East Granby, met a lot of us here, and now she is fully embedded in Windsor activities. Yeah. Anyway, we would meet once a month at Union Street Tavern and talk, and occasionally and have speakers. I got to meet our current governor. It was kind of exciting because I'm from California, and you don't get to do that in California unless you're the head of Google or something. But anyway, it went strong until 2019 when one of the co-hosts, Al Simon, moved up to Northampton, which he did not ask permission for. And then the pandemic hit, and Liz DuPont-Deal was sort of left doing this on her own. There were a lot of chapters across the country that folded. And then last year's election happened, and I wanted to see if I could do a little something to bring some sanity back. So I arranged for a new venue because Union Street had been sold. That venue, alas, has fallen through. That's a nice way to put it. But fear not, I am looking for another venue. I'm hoping in July we will be meeting so we can once again meet, talk, encourage, and drink. Jane and I ran into each other, I don't know, it seems like a long while ago. But
it was like weeks ago.
Yeah, weeks ago. And we had common goals. I wanted to bring Drinking Liberally back, and Jane wanted to bring Windsor's favorite native son in front of his fans. So, without further ado, let me bring to the fore here, Jane Garibay.
Hello, everybody. I missed that, Don Trinks. So I'm really excited to see you all. There's so many friends within the room, and ones I haven't seen in quite a while since election time, the Bayos. And I'll tell you, this man right here did a video riding around his yardage street on his tractor with my signs. And I have a story about almost each and every one of you here, and I just appreciate you all coming out. I wanted to invite Chris today, and I'm going to make him blush maybe, but working in the political field, one of the things that's most important to me is honesty and integrity.
Hear, hear.
And that's not just the political field, it's everywhere. And Chris has that, and sometimes it's detrimental because people don't like it when you hold them accountable, right? So, I know, and I'm not going to go through some of the rough roads you've had by having that honesty and integrity and fighting for the people of Connecticut. And I did do this up, so I'm going to kind of half read it. Chris is widely regarded as one of the nation's premier trial attorneys, and Forbes put him in the top 200 lists of top lawyers in the United States. A highly effective courtroom advocate, Chris has been called upon to handle some of the highest profile trials in the country. He doesn't look old enough to have done this. Including serving as lead counsel for Sandy Hook families. In his defamation lawsuit against far-right media personality Alex Jones. The trial culminated in a $1.4 billion jury verdict, the largest defamation award in the state of Connecticut in all of our history. He represents victims of defamation, medical negligence, sexual abuse, civil rights violations. Most recently, he obtained $10.9 million judgment in a jury trial against a prominent orthopedic practice that negligently and fatally failed to diagnose a deep vein thrombosis following knee replacement surgery. He also has an extensive pro bono practice. In 2019, he coordinated the defense of 11 protesters in the city of Bridgeport who were arrested during a racial justice demonstration. In 2023, Chris successfully challenged an election official's unlawful denial of ballot access to a Democratic mayoral candidate. A trial resulted affirmed by the Connecticut Supreme Court. Prior to joining HOSCA, did I say that right? Chris served as chief of the Financial Fraud and Public Corruption Unit with the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Connecticut. As federal prosecutor, Chris supervised and served as a trial counsel in the prosecution of former Governor John G. Rowland and others on campaign finance and obstruction of justice charges. Now, in 2025, Chris has represented and secured a consent order on behalf of FBI Agents Association against the Trump administration. Preventing the Trump administration from publicly identifying and purging thousands of FBI agents who investigated the January 6 attacks at the U.S. Capitol. He has also advised many nonprofits and local officials across the country on how to prepare and respond to unlawful executive actions targeting immigrant communities and the organizations and local officials who represent them. I know Chris as a lawyer, as a friend, who does the right thing, even when the difficult choice, because many times holding people, as I said, has consequences. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris, because that's who you want to hear.
Wow. It's really wonderful to see so many of you. It's really heartwarming to see so many friends here and to be back in Windsor, where I grew up, where my parents still live, where we had our first children, and where I was next door neighbor of Jane Garibay on Broad Street here. Until we moved in 2016. Our third child, Gabriel, was a wonderful surprise, but he was a surprise. And we ran out of room in our house on Broad Street, so we had to move. So if anybody wants to blame me for moving, you can blame my son, Gabriel. Karen, thank you too for everything you've done and for relaunching Drinking Liberally. I feel a lot of pressure now because there's going to be another meeting, and I hope I don't screw it up for everybody. You're going to want to come back, to the next meeting. But I am really, really pleased to be here. Because, in this moment that we're in right now, even just gathering together as a community is a real act of defiance in our little corner of the world here. A lot of what we've seen from the Trump administration is chaos and incomprehensible unless you think of everything he's done as being part of a larger effort to suppress and chill dissent as a prelude to a larger kind of authoritarian attempt. And a lot of what he's done has been about that, including one of his first acts in office, pardoning 1,500 people who attacked the Capitol on January 6th. Obviously, there was nothing legitimate about those pardons, but what it was a signal to the rest of us that people who are willing to commit political violence on his behalf will be forgiven and will be immune, and the people who they direct that violence towards, Trump doesn't care about, including law enforcement officers. The shows of attacks against migrant communities, including disappearances of people without due process, is a signal to the rest of us that Trump is committed to exercising maximum power against both citizens and non-citizens alike. And now what we're seeing in Los Angeles, the deployment of active military troops to an American city has nothing to do with the extent of any protests or even riots in Los Angeles, all of which are kind of controlled. And let's face it, we have a history in the United States of being able to deal with protests, including violent protests, including civil disobedience, without having to call in active Marines. And so that too is a way of projecting his power to the rest of us. And so I really mean this, like just getting together to talk about the future of the country that we love, in resistance to what I see as an unpatriotic and even traitorous president, is an act of defiance. So that's like, drinking liberally has kind of a funny name, and there's a lot of jokes and a lot of camaraderie, but it really is a proactive act of citizenship. So I'm really happy to be here with all of you tonight. I want to talk a little bit about the last time I was at Drinking Liberally, which I think was in 2016, 2017. Florence was nice enough to say I look the same. I know that's not true. It was at the Union Street Tavern, and I actually was a candidate for office myself at that time. A lot of you remember, a lot of you supported me. And I was a new candidate, and it was like packed, because it was like right after the first time Trump was elected, and everybody was engaged, right? You remember like the Women's March and the Pink Hats and the rallies and mass mobilizations, and there was a whole lot of really inspiring ferment and activism. And I went, and it was awesome, and it was fun, and I was running for office at the time because I had been a federal prosecutor focused mainly on public corruption and corruption of our markets, and after Trump had won, I kind of came to a realization in my own mind that what had happened was a mass rejection of traditional party politics, traditional party elites, a recognition that corruption had kind of embedded itself into our economy and our political system, and that Trump had very skillfully exploited that. So I wanted to talk about that. And running for office was one of the most meaningful experiences in my life, partly because of the relationships, really mainly because of the relationships I made through that campaign, including with many of you. But it wasn't a successful campaign in the traditional sense, in that we didn't get more votes than the other guy. But it was an expression of, I think, a desire among many people, including people who had not been traditionally involved in democratic politics, for something different. And from there, I went back to my job as a lawyer, and I got involved in the case that Jane mentioned on behalf of the Sandy Hook families. And there I had a view into a world that was totally foreign to me, which was the online, far-right, radical movement that kind of powered Trump's ascent before any of us really realized how big it was. Nowadays, for people who follow politics, it's really popular to talk about these far-right podcasters and, online engagement and all of that. This was happening organically on the far right before Trump ran for office in 2016. It powered him, and it was where this lie about Sandy Hook took hold, thanks to people like Alex Jones and then others who have mimicked him since. And so I wasn't shocked on January 6th when we saw what we saw, because the ecosystem, which is mainly online, where lies like the one about Sandy Hook and like the one about the 2020 election and every other conspiracy theory that we're now well acquainted with, take root and distort people. Maybe even some people you know. And that type of activity, when it becomes mobilized and radicalized, can turn into what happened on January 6th. And it continues to be a threat to our country. It's partly why I'm really, really proud that we were able to demonstrate in a public way during that trial the horrible impact that lies can have on both our society and on people individually. And so now we're here in this moment where it can feel really, I don't know, how do you all feel? Like sometimes it feels like, where do we go from here? Because in my mind, the political organization, the Democratic Party, that I will tell you, I think is, over the last 75 years, has probably done more good than any political organization in the history of the world when it comes to human freedom and human opportunity, has been discredited because of its failures, what I would say over the last 10 to 15 years, to meaningfully and authentically connect with the people who need it most, and who Trump has fooled. Or at least Trump has been somebody who they could turn to in desperation. And I'm talking about working people who are struggling, who are not politically active, and who have seen the political organization, the Democratic Party, that for years and years and years was a tribune for working people, for working families, where our leaders came out of things like the labor movement and local activism. And they no longer see a party that connects with them and can make a difference in their lives. And so what I think we need to see at a time when the political, we're not seeing the mass political protests that we saw in 2016 and 2017. And the truth is that, like, the political opposition feels anemic. But the courts are kind of the one institution that have really proven up to the task so far during the Trump administration. And that's crucial because it's buying us time. You know, so far, the Trump administration, although it has defied court orders at times, has not yet shown a wholesale willingness to reject the authority of the courts. And let me give you an example of that. This will be a little bit of a war story here as a diversion, because I could sense I was really getting depressing. In January, late January, you remember we had all the pardons, and the Trump administration fired the FBI leadership that had run the January 6th cases and a number of prosecutors who had been involved. And we started to get word, when I say we, I mean people who had served in the Justice Department, had started to get word that Trump was going to fire every FBI agent who had worked on January 6th. That would have been 5,000 FBI agents. Because after all those rioters left the Capitol, they went back to their communities. And as the investigations started and continued, those investigations extended into every state in the country where any of those rioters might live, where any of that evidence might be collected. 5,000 FBI agents, which obviously would have decimated the FBI, would have compromised the FBI's ability to do national security and law enforcement. And so we started scrambling, people who had been at the Justice Department. What are we going to do? How are we going to prevent this? There were some calls going around over the course of the weekend, and at the end of it all, a colleague of mine, Margaret Donovan, and I, she also had served at the U.S. Attorney's Office, were in a meeting with the FBI Agents Association. I didn't even know this thing existed. The FBI Agents Association is basically like a professional services organization for FBI agents. It's not a union, but it's kind of like a union. And they said, we want you, Chris and Margaret, to file a temporary restraining order to prevent the Trump administration from publicly identifying and firing all of the FBI agents who worked on January 6th. I was talking to Don earlier, and most of my cases now are like, catastrophic medical negligence, product liability, defamation, but I'm not one of these lawyers who's like going to the Supreme Court of the United States and down in Washington, D.C. and And so we said, no, you don't want us. You want like, a Washington, D.C. lawyer. You want somebody who knows the D.C. courts. You want somebody who's used to going up against the federal government. No, we want you guys. We want you guys. And so over the course of like a night and a half, Margaret and I put together this application for a restraining order. And we were able to secure an order barring the federal government from publicly identifying the FBI agents or taking mass action against them. And there were a lot of lawyers in a similar position to Margaret and me during that time who were doing similar things, helping where they could, getting a little further out over their skis than they were probably comfortable with, because we were in a moment where it could go either way. But certainly nobody could trust that the Trump administration would show its own self-restraint. And so they needed to be restrained by the courts. And so you've seen, I think, a really inspiring exercise of judicial power and the power of individual plaintiffs to go against the Trump administration and vindicate the rule of law. But what that really gets us is just time. It just gets us time. Because these cases will wind their way to the Supreme Court. Who knows what the Supreme Court will do? If over time the Trump administration feels it's too restrained from doing what it wants to do, especially in the space of immigration, it may really test, whether or not the American people will tolerate a president's defiance of court orders. And so I guess what I am feeling right now is that the midterm elections in 2026, if we get there, are going to be a crucial existential moment for the country. I really, really believe that. And the Democratic Party, or candidates who are running as Democrats opposed to Republicans, have to carry us there. Have to carry us there. And so what can we do as individuals, whether you're traditionally active in politics or not, to help make that happen? Well, there are some things we can do, I think, that are not necessarily political. Just kind of building resilient institutions in our democracy is really, really important. So supporting things like nonprofits or community organizations, or running for local office, or building relationships that can sustain, kind of a lot of the controversy and resentment that you see nationally, is kind of, to me, the daily exercise of being a citizen. But then beyond that, supporting candidates who are going to tip the balance when it comes to the House and the Senate. But then there's a longer-term project, I think, which is supporting candidates that will really allow the Democratic Party to build a sustainable majority. And the only way that that happens is by attracting and connecting with the working class majority in the United States. That is the only way you can build a sustainable majority in the United States. And the scary thing is that against all of our intuitions and common sense, the last presidential election showed an ever-increasing share of communities of color supporting Donald Trump, an ever-increasing share of communities without a college degree supporting Trump, an ever-increasing share of families making under $100,000 a year supporting Trump. That's an indictment. That really is an indictment of the political left in the United States. And what we need to do, what I believe needs to happen, is we need to have a rejuvenation of the Democratic Party by not deferring any longer to party leadership, not deferring any longer to the wisdom of party elders, because the proof is kind of in the pudding. It kind of is. And I think, and I don't think that we should, cast aside public servants or politicians just because they've been there a long time or not anything like that. What I mean is that we need to encourage organic, energetic activism within the Democratic Party and raise up candidates like Jane Garibay, who long before she got into politics, long before she ever even thought about politics, was showing that she cared about her community, wanted to serve her neighbors, was volunteering for stuff nobody else would volunteer for, and has a genuine, authentic bond of affection with the community that she's now serving. I know I'm embarrassing her. She really is a model. And she's a model public servant because she's not a careerist. She's not somebody who's in it for her own ambition or seeking attention for herself. And of course, running for office is partly about getting attention because you're trying to get votes. But the kind of attention I think we want and will stand in real stark and meaningful contrast to the Republican Party is by promoting and finding candidates from non-traditional backgrounds who really can speak to the aspirations and daily lives of their neighbors and the people that they want to serve. That's how you get trust. That's how you get loyalty and authentic connection. And that's what I really think we can do. It's also a way of promoting kindness and empathy and neighborliness and reliance on people and interconnection, which are all things that Trump depends on us not having, right? That MAGA movement depends on us being splintered and at each other's throats and thinking that we have nothing in common with each other and thinking that if I get something, you lose. But if you seek out candidates who embody those types of values as a Democratic Party, or if you're not even part of the Democratic Party, but you're like, I can do that, that's what's really going to matter in the long term. I really, really believe that. It's like not that complicated. It's really about just like elevating people who you know really care and have lived through the same kind of stuff that other people have lived through. And so I hope that I'm going to end here on a positive note, because we can't just kind of cower. We can't just kind of like let the TV light wash over us at night. We need that connection with each other, like that we're all having right now. And I really think in the end it's stronger, but it does need to be, it really does need to be an organic, ground up, neighborhood, local effort to reestablish connection with people who will trust Democratic Party representatives to look out for them in a way that they don't right now, fair or unfair. So I went on one there for a little bit. I think that you want to do some questions, but thank you very much. Hi.
Chris, help us with why we can't get decent messaging out from the Democratic Party. I see the Republican Party and I see Trump with the demonization. That messaging is playing to some people, the demonization of immigrants, the demonization of unions. How and or why, or what do
Yeah. So I'm not a, you know, anybody's opinion is as good as mine. I'm not a political pundit, but I think that it started when, you know, President Biden did not or was not able to use the bully pulpit of the presidency to drive a message about where he was taking the country and why, and the meaning of the policies that he was pursuing, which over time are going to be incredibly important to the United States. I mean, I have to say that I think from a policy standpoint, President Biden was a massive success for the country. I think from a leadership standpoint, especially towards the latter part of his presidency, it was terribly lacking at a time when inflation was going up and people increasingly felt like their lives were not within their control, and they didn't have, I think they felt, and rightly so, that they couldn't look to a president to tell them how we were going to get out of this and what he and his party were doing. So there was a vacuum in messaging. It almost wasn't like the wrong, it's like a vacuum. And now, you know, we're kind of in a situation where we lack a credible national voice who can command national attention. But, and so like the day-to-day of it, you know, can feel very frustrating. But at the same time, you know, it's not like everybody lives their lives following the national news. And so if we have candidates who are running, you know, for the House of Representatives or state office, who are kind of consistently finding ways to communicate about what they want to do for people, not just, you know, opposition to Trump. Like, opposition to Trump is easy. Like, most people don't like Trump. He won, but most people don't like him. But also talking about, like, what do we really want to do for people? So, like today, Governor Lamont had an event where he was highlighting a bill that was passed that's going to pay people who are engaged in child care more money. It's going to make access to child care for working families easier, and that's going to lower the cost of child care. That's a huge deal for people, you know, who need to work full time and have nowhere to put their kids and can't afford it. So like they're almost working just to pay for child care. It's a huge deal. And we kind of need people who can talk about those issues, even locally, even if we're not like commanding messaging at the national level. But choosing the right candidates there really matters, because these opportunities to communicate, you know, campaigns really provide them a vehicle for that, you know. And so choosing the right candidates in the run-up to the midterms and in the run-up to whatever the Connecticut General Assembly elections are going to be, or the municipal elections are going to be, it's really important. And you know, everybody here has this, I assume, everybody has some social media account or another. I know it's a blessing and a curse, mostly a curse. But amplifying messaging that you see and directing it to, you know, people who you're in relationship with on social media is something we can do. The challenge is that you kind of sometimes feel like you're just talking to people who already feel the same way you do. And so finding ways to reach people who, you know, may not be engaged in politics every day is both a challenge and a necessity.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
Yes, sir.
It's not a question. I was listening to Bruce Springsteen, and this guy, you know, really excoriated Trump in the most powerful way, him and also Larson. We need guys like that who are willing to tell the truth to power. You know, maybe Springsteen be kind of like a Ronald Reagan. Who knows? I'm not a prophet, but it would be. And I think, like you were saying, you know, we need to get people have to get involved in the election process. Many millions of people didn't even vote the last time, so we need to get a lot more people involved in the voting process. Even though they're trying to stop it, they're not going to be able to stop it. But if people really need to understand how serious the situation is, because I mean, we're heading toward something like a fascist regime here. I'm Jewish. I know what happened in Germany. And it could happen here. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm not a prophet. I don't know. But it seems we're tending to go in that direction. And I hope and pray that the American people stand up. And maybe there will be some, like you said, who would be willing to stand up, like Cheney, a woman. We got most of these women that are standing up got more guts than the men do. I'm telling you, I'm serious.
Not a surprise to me.
So that's my comment. That's, you know.
I also
Go ahead.
say I think sometimes the people that I work with in the Democrat community, sometimes we're too nice. And we think that we can bring someone along or that we can talk. But I know people say I'm nice, but I don't like, let me tell you. And most people here are nice. You can be nice, but you can stand up for yourself, you can stand up for what you believe.
Right.
And just with my personal story, when the president said he was going to, send out any people that were not born here in the United States, right? He said that.
Yeah.
Well, my husband was not born in the United States. My two oldest children were not born in the United States. And it's very scary. Believe me, we're trying to think, we're behind in the house. We're at ease. And we're better off than most because I'm involved. But I know you guys have gone a little bit through the same thing for your children. And so we have to be prepared. We have to stand up for it. Nobody wants murderers in our country, whether they're American, Mexican, Spanish, French. No, so don't always listen to the noise. And you can be kind, but still stand up for what you believe in. Stand up for the neighbor that needs the help. And I totally agree with your whole message. Being a community, and this right here shows that community. Sorry.
That's good.
One thing that I've come across recently is issues that the young folks have, and I mean like 20 to 35. When I say young,
My age.
like I have children and nieces and nephews in that age range, and they vote, but they're pretty checked out because their whole voting life has been Trump. And all of the stuff that's been going on, which is awful, none of it is working in their favor. No one's addressing the climate. No one's addressing housing. Jobs right now are evaporating like wildfire. I mean, it's a really scary time for that age range, and I wonder if you had any comments about that.
It is, you know, it's.
Look at your face, Chris.
When you said that, like, you know, for a lot of these young-ish adults, their entire voting life has the Trump era, and that makes me so sad. You know, because it's hard to communicate what our country was like when I was growing up, for example. Imperfect, for sure. You know, I mean, we can debate like whether the neoliberal, you know, approach of the 80s and 90s was good or not, but there was a consensus about how to treat each other in politics, and there was a presumption of good faith, really, by everybody involved, and so that's hard for me to hear. I haven't really thought about that. But what can we do to engage them? I mean, one thing we can do is like support them when they run for office. You know, I mean, because there's not like, I can see, you know, how many people in the 20 to 35 age range would be disillusioned with our country. They're not buying homes. They can't afford homes.
Right.
They grew up, many of them, in an internet age and social media age where this is something, don't get me going on this, but I feel like we have so terribly failed people who who are now adults who grew up in, let's say, the 2010s to, early 2020s, when everybody got a cell phone, everybody got a social media account, the government did nothing to regulate social media companies and how they manipulated children. And because of that, there's loneliness, there's mental illness, there's low senses of self-worth, right? And as they get older, they are realizing that that was a failure of the country too, and it was. And they have debt, credit card debt, that they can. So it makes sense to me that they think, that a lot of them think, well, what's the point? But I know that there are leaders in that cohort or that generation who are going to, at some point, offer themselves as leaders for political office. And shame on us if we don't support them. And if we think, oh, wait your turn, or we know best, or, put in your time first, that's bullshit. And they know it. And so, I think that we need to empower people. I really think that we need to empower people who feel disempowered and have been, and that age group is one of those groups, I think.
Do we have anyone of the younger people here? I'm not putting this on the spot. Yeah, I know you're artistic. But we have quite a few people under 30 that want to share. Yes. Please? No? Please? Nobody wants
We're all gonna vote for that.
I don't know if I qualify. I'm 30 and 35.
Still young.
No, I was going to say, and I've seen this brought up. A few different, on the Daily Show a week or two ago. The problem that the left is having engaged with young men, and young white males in particular. And it's something I've seen, and they interviewed a guy who happens to be a bro, and he's kind of like a liberal bro, but he's a very rare minority. But then everything that's available for consumption of political thought. So you have all these young men who are kind of getting attracted by these voices who are saying, like, oh, it's great to be a guy. And there is, I have personally felt within, I socialized in very leftist communities. My favorite bar was the same. And, not exactly the safe place for a Republican. And I love being there, but in a few conversations where I tried to express the liberal thoughts I had, I was told flat out, point blank, your opinion doesn't matter because you're straight or white or you're male. And if I was an emotional person, I'm sure I'd be like, well, now I kind of see the appeal of some of these crazy right-wing people on the internet. And I stick to my convictions. I'm like, no, I still believe in liberal thought and liberal philosophy, but I have to say, when I talk to people on the other side, especially guys my age, and they say, oh, they espouse these conservative talking points that I know they're smart enough to realize that makes no sense whatsoever. But they've been told on that side, not only is it okay to be a male, but it's also like you're looked at as a male. That's so I don't know. I think seeing more of our side do more to engage that and say, definitely not better than you. You already might help kind of engage and minimize that risk.
I want to take what Susan said and turn it around. You've had the unenviable task of living and exploring the depths of the right-wing stuff. They've been very successful.
Yeah.
What have you learned from wading through that swamp about their successful techniques that we can use.
Oh, well, you know, the,
Don't be scared of love.
lies take root among people who are isolated and are looking for community. So, you know, the choose your conspiracy theory, QAnon, Sandy Hook hoaxers, January 6th and the 2020 election. The power, like once you are presented with a theory of things and other people, and even for whatever reason you're receptive to it, right? We've always had, you know, free-thinking people who are prone to conspiratorial thinking. They don't always go off the deep end, right? But when you find a community around something like that, that sense of identity within that community is far more powerful than, you know, my arguments to you about why what you believe is obviously incorrect.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think, you know, one of the most powerful tools that, and I'm talking mainly about like the online right wing, which is, you know, largely male, largely white, although less and less so, and angry. But what I think binds them is a sense of kind of the power of sharing an identity. And in society these days, it's kind of hard to find that sense of community offline. Traditional identity, this is kind of what you were getting at earlier, you know, masculinity or, you know, the provider, right, have kind of been undermined by a lot of economic and social forces. That's a reality. And so they, on the far online right, they kind of find their identity among those who believe in not just conspiracies, but also kind of a far right way of thinking about the world. Now,
What is that thinking?
oh well, it's male-centered. It's often misogynist. It's often, you know, a belief that you know, kind of power is aligned against them, and that they're the ones who really see that and kind of can connect the dots about it. But at the heart of it, it's really just a sense of belonging. And you know, we obviously are not going to have the same tools and weapons, but giving people a sense of belonging and actually welcoming them in all people, but including young men, of course, and building community around a set of kind of political priorities is what needs to happen. People need to feel part of something. They don't want to just be spoken to, they want to be part of it. And you know, the other thing that, as kind of dark and malign as some of those spaces on the internet can be, there's also humor, there's also fun, right? Like, don't underestimate the power of Trump as like kind of just a comedic, amusing figure for people. Especially men of a certain age, you know, in their 20s or whatever. Like, he's kind of just doesn't care, says whatever comes to mind, kind of a joker. You never know whether he's serious or not. And for a certain cohort, that's like different and attractive, and they're in on the joke. So, you know, that's kind of how I see that world. There's also like a lot of danger in that world, because people fall down a rabbit hole, they lose all real meaningful social connection, and You know, if they can be radicalized online, some percentage of them are radicalized offline and can commit violence. And so obviously that's, I think there are some things that people on the political left who want to build a community, especially with disaffected groups, can learn from, but for the most part, like that's not a world we want to replicate.
So I was in the original review of it when Al Simon started it years ago. I remember you were running. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said the speech has turned so differently with Trump that those are the people that he's attracted because he doesn't sound like a politician. So there were these people, whether educated, uneducated, you know, under a hole somewhere, no teeth, or whatever it is you may think of them, that grabbed onto that with him because you didn't have any other politician that spoke that way, and they believed him. You know, they just believed him. And even though he has not shown to do what he said he would do, they still believe him. Like my brother, who was a Navy SEAL, and every time I visit him in Washington State, it's like, okay, we're not watching CNN or Fox News. He's a big Trump supporter, and the last time I talked to him, he goes, well, we need somebody who's tough out there. Well, he's just not tough. He's just not a nice guy. And we're used to nice guys in politics. And is it working? I don't know that it's really working, and we still have to find that out by the next election, whether or not it's working. I think that we're starting to see the good people coming out, even in the Republican Party, that begin to understand how disruptive he is, and they're not really agreeing with that. So my faith is in the fact that there are enough good people in there to kind of stop him from doing the chaos that he's doing. Whether or not that'll happen, I don't know, but the Democrats are just not saying anything. You know, nobody's saying anything at the end of the day, and nobody's believing them at the end of the day. So why is that? You know, what happened with them? I agree that Biden made a huge mistake in the last part of his being president, and that there were all these problems that were just hidden. But you look at what Trump's doing, and what Trump's doing is exactly what he didn't want the department to do, going after him. He's going after everybody who went after him. And I think people are beginning to see that. So I have faith that it will change. We just have an angry society right now. Everybody's angry. I'm in healthcare, which is why I know Jane so well. I have my own nursing practice, which deal with elderly people, and she and I have conversations all the time. People are just angry. They're angry about everything.
Yeah.
And it's just sad.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. But I have faith that there's enough good people in the world that things are just going to change. And the more good we are, the better it's going to be. We can't go to that other side, you know, and not be good people.
So true. I coach Little League. My 9-year-old Gabriel, who I told you about before. And I love coaching Little League because, like, all the other coaches, you know, all the volunteers, all the parents who come to support what's happening, it really is a reminder about exactly what you're saying, which is that there are really good people who are trying to raise their kids the right way, who are supporting their communities in different ways. Yeah. The Windsor Education Alliance.
And the Baressi's,
the legal way. Oh yeah.
families in town.
So it's true. It's true. You know, the challenge is kind of rejuvenating that kind of civic ethos, especially among young people, and civic activists like Florence Barlow, who's been doing this forever. Like, she's made such a big part of her life. Just being. It's a huge part of her identity, just being like a Windsor community member, you know, and taking that responsibility really seriously, and also getting a lot of personal meaning out of it. It's still there, but we really need to reach out to each other. We really do, you know.
So I was formulating my question as a number of comments came up. So I think that Susan's question and your comments and Eric's question kind of feed into it. But Chris, I know you're here in Windsor. I hope I'm assuming that you made some stops in some other towns. I don't know if that's true or not.
No.
Oh, okay.
Only Windsor.
Good, because I got a backup here. I've got Jane who through her going to the Capitol, hears what's going on around the state. I don't have faith. I have fear. I have fear that Connecticut as a blue state is more thin and fragile than any of us believe, and that it can swing. It swings in Windsor occasionally with our budget referendum. This year was a good year. But our traffic referendum, it swung towards believing the lies and believing the unfounded and the tactics. And I think that that can lead to flipping of a chamber or two of the Connecticut House. The governor's race has been razor thin a number of times. I don't see Connecticut as a solidly blue state. It's the blue state machine works and puts out good legislation, good policy, good budgets, and pretty good fiscal management. Sometimes I think it gets a little ahead of itself with how progressive, how liberal the initiatives are, and maybe how expansive the government is. Things that maybe I don't disagree with, but I'm a little concerned that maybe there's a lot of folks who think government should get involved in certain things. Mentioning the unengaged. I've got family members over in Windham County, and there have been elections where I wanted to call them and say, "Hey, you're going to go out and vote." But I wasn't sure who they were going to vote for when they went out, so I wanted to be careful about that. So between you and Jane, I'd like to hear how solidly blue do you think Connecticut is? How at risk are we? 2, 4, 6 years. So thinking more at the state level.
I'll start. I don't think we can take anything for granted, even in solid blue areas. Right now, we have the supermajority in the House, we have the supermajority in the Senate, which means if we wanted to, we could overrule the governor, which is not something that anyone would use lightly. I know in my world, we work at herding us together. We passed transformational the housing bill. It's supporting it, really understanding it, those things, because the towns don't like it. They don't like it. And what really threw me for a loop is to hear that in the cities where they have benches, they're putting spikes in the middle so that the homeless can't sleep on the benches. That is really, that's what I'm talking about, realities. That is really, in this bill, simple things like portable showers for the homeless. We have our own here in Windsor. There are a bunch of people that live out on the street. There was one living in our post office for years during the cold. So that's here in Windsor. I think we're very blue, Nathan, but we can't take it for granted. We cannot take it for granted. In the House, if we have, maybe it's 30, I'm not sure exactly, 30 people vote with the opposite side, we can lose a bill. But I think our leadership is really good. I think they empower women. I think they empower people like myself who are of an older age that, they gave me the position, and I'm not the only one. They look for people that will work with others, work for democratic ideals, and do. You might not have known that for the last day of session, because that was a lot of everybody that was watching it. It was like beyond, you can even make that up in a movie. So I think it's there, but even here in Windsor, our taxes went up, not because of our own thing, it was because of reval and all these different things, and people voted for it. But it's going to make the election of our
Democratic leaders more difficult, and all they have to do is pick off one. Sarah?
All I'm gonna say is y'all gotta get on TikTok because all the young kids are on TikTok. You want them to listen to you, you get on there, you talk to them really quickly. It's about this, it's about this, it's about this. And just be honest and tell them what's happening and why it's happening, because they're not involved and they're not benefiting. Because they're too busy trying to survive. But if they're flipping through TikTok.
I'm supposed to learn this summer.
If somebody comes through and they grab them with a couple of 30 seconds worth of something, they get them hooked and then they'll start getting involved. Nobody's doing that.
I think a lot of them do it. I will say, we have a bill that was going to protect LGBT community in nursing homes. Very controversial bill, as you can imagine, not with the Democrats. But MJ Shannon, who is 23 years old, the youngest person ever elected. Do you know MJ? Okay, awesome. And
You got them to speak.
huh?
You got them to speak.
Yeah, but he doesn't know because he works and he interned at the Capitol. So did Stevie over here from Massachusetts. He was going to training school, so some of the younger people. But MJ took out that bill. They filibustered him for 4 hours. He had support. They pulled out an old rule book that a legislator can only talk to another legislator when bringing out a full bill. And I won't even say the words because it's improper, but it's totally stupid. My policy person sits next to me, sits next to Jillian Gilchrist, sits next to Jason Rowe. Your policy people are always there, and he was made, the policy person was behind him in case he needed help with a question, was made to leave. And we did send over, they're the ones that know the bills inside and out, right? But it just goes to show you, as young as MJ is, he pulled it through. It was 4 hours, but they didn't filibuster him to death where we lost the bill. So now there will be training in nursing homes on how to respect everyone in the nursing home. And there is a fine on nursing homes who get repeated complaints and don't. But again, if you listened, did anyone get to see that? No? Did you see it, Jake? It was awful. It was really awful language I've never heard in my life that they used. And they just it was just beyond. So young people are, in the House now, I feel we have a good mixture. You know, we have a great Black Puerto Rican caucus. We have an LGBTQ caucus. There's moderates, conservatives, moderates and progressives, and there's just good mix of age, etc. And you have to give credit to Matt Ritter, our leader, because you have to herd all these people. He's got to make sure that everything comes together so that these bills get passed, like housing, which was a very difficult one. What were some of the others? Also, a lot died, though, because we got filibustered the last by a Democrat, too.
Yeah.
For the last hour. So we lost education bills and child care bills. So do I believe we are strongly Democratic, but we have, if we're not careful, you can lose it. You have to take care of your family. You got to make sure they're fed, whatever, or you can lose them. For everything you have to work for and never, ever, ever take it for granted. Just like I know myself, Chris, Lisa, who's on town council, or Mayor Trace, never take the people of Windsor for granted. You have to work for it. You have to work for your vote, work for your trust us, etc. And that's what we all have to do, is work together, because it's so easy to divide us up. That is true. It's just so easy. We have to stick together and we have to support. So an election comes this fall.
Economy.
You'll hear your signs on the lawn.
I will.
Many of you I have. I've met you door knocking.
Yes.
You know? So it's just, I think that's. Unless Chris wants to know. Okay.
Just a few things. I'm not remembering this.
Talk loud.
I had a quarter glass of wine, locally, I think the one thing that we need to do is repair the relationships with our Democrats. I think everything starts locally. And I also think that we have a lot of Democrats that have their own views of who we should be without considering everybody who's a Democrat in town and taking it all in and doing what's best for our town and not little pockets of what people believe in. As far as the young people being engaged, my daughter says to me, "Mom, I don't want to hear the bad stuff. I do my own thing. I do my research. I know what's going on. Just tell me the good stuff. Tell me how it used to be. Tell me how Graham and Grandpa used to be politically." She wants to hear the positive stuff. We don't talk about the positive stuff. We tell her, never mind, our kids or the young people that we're working with or that are in town or in different programs with us. And I think we need to do that. I know these people, when I'm on Facebook and somebody posts something, you always get a red heart. And somebody said to me recently, "How do you love everything?" He said, "Well, I can love what you wrote. I can love the fact that you have the guts to put it out there. It's love, you know, you just gotta get it love." Jane and I will post a picture of the two of us in some department store. She posts a picture of the house. I always make her try and have you take pictures, and we will get hundreds of likes. I post something politically, I get 3. Everybody is so afraid to have a voice. You don't have to do nothing, you just have to put a thumbs up. You have to put a smiley face, a heart. You have to start standing up for your fellow people and showing that we are one community. I have been waiting for so long to her ears that our community is nothing like it used to be when I grew up. We used to take care of our own because we had one thing to go with. And we don't have that anymore. And we have to start building our community. We have to start working together. We have to have one goal, and that is for what the Democrats stand for. We have to take care of each other. That's all. If you ever want to know the truth, Chris is much more important than me.
He's done a good job.
Oh, that's being cool.
So I think we have to recognize that during the Trump era, one of the reasons Democrats have had success in Connecticut is because traditional Republican constituencies in Fairfield County couldn't stomach Trump. And so we started getting more margins out of more affluent, more white towns in the southern part of the state, while losing vote share in almost every city in the state, among poor people and communities of color. That's a reality. And so we've been able, when I say we, I primarily mean statewide Democrats led by the governor, have been able to put together a winning coalition that I think is probably fleeting, because there will come a time when Trump is gone and when national Republicans aren't quite so objectionable to people in more affluent suburban towns. And my sense is that some of them will realize that they prefer the more traditional Republican agenda. And we better be prepared to unify our more traditional Democratic constituencies in poor and urban communities if we are going to win statewide majorities consistently. I believe that. And I also think that that requires more consistent statewide party building, which we have also not had in recent years. So I think in federal elections, the basics are still good for Democrats in Connecticut. I think in statewide elections and in legislative seats, it's the sustained success we've had has been based on a coalition that I think is probably not as stable as we think, and reflects some real weakness in the traditional base of the Democratic Party, which we should really care about. That's how I see it.
Isn't it true that the largest voting bloc in Connecticut is unaffiliated? They don't want to be Democrat, they don't want to be Republican. That's the largest bloc.
I believe that is true.
It has been for a number of years. And I've spoken to people about changing it, party types, and they don't think they can do it. So if you're going to get those people, you're going to have to address real problems in the party structure.
I also want to say, as you know, as co-chair of aging, one of the most amazing facts is that 27% of the Connecticut population is over 65? 60, I think, 60. And you vote. You vote and you have a voice. So you have to use that when you can. And it's growing. And that's why they're trying to get ready with all the different services and whatever that are abominable.
The thing is, people don't understand the power that they have. So, you know, I had a discussion with Dr. Anwar this year, 20-minute Zoom call, told him my feelings about what's going on in a couple of areas. And in that 20-minute phone call, he put together 3 bills, right? 3 bills with one person. I don't know if they're going to go through. They came out of committee. I don't know how it's going to go. But when I was at the podiatrist the other day, there was 7 people for a 1 o'clock appointment. The girl opens up the window to check everybody in, and everybody was complaining. So I said to everyone, because you know I'm outspoken, really, you know, you're going to go home and you're going to complain to everyone about how you had to wait for the appointment and there were so many people for a 1 o'clock appointment. What you need to do is contact your representatives, contact your senators, and let them know that. And then maybe things will change because healthcare is all about money, right? How many people you can get in there? How many widgets you can build? And they all looked at me like I had 3 heads. And none of them will probably do anything, but I don't think people understand the power that they have. My calling Jane or texting her, can you have breakfast before the legislation starts? Yeah, not a problem. We sit down, we have breakfast. And I think there are a litany of issues going on with the elderly population, which has created some bills that she's put together because I sat there and said, I'm terrified to get old. I need to die in my sleep, for sure. And but we have the power, and people don't understand we have the power. And the people that were online, for instance, for the budget stuff, none of them went to the meetings. None of them read the budget to understand what the budget was about. But they were. So my advice to everybody is, if you're going to complain, then do something about it. Because we have the power to pick up the phone.
I have to say that's one of my favorite things. I may have coffee next week with all of you, but if you have something to chat about,
I'll give you all her cell phone number.
You know what? My cell phone is out there. You know that everybody has it. And only once, and recently did I tell someone who just lost the right to have a cell phone. But, you know, it is, because that's the only way, like Sharon's saying, that's the only way that even Chris in his position, or me in mine, or our town council knows what you're thinking and what's important to you. And to have this turnout come out because you cared enough about this subject. Of course, Stevie came from Pittsfield, did I get it right? Massachusetts. You know, so that's the part, and that voice is important because you do learn something that you can do. I will say we had more amendments this year on bills than ever before. They were like things, and we had more bills. I think there were like 4,800 bills. Only about 250 make it. Which is about 250, and mine all did, so
You know, we're coming up to time, but I have one last question for Chris after that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we're coming up to
this weekend, there's a lot of protests planned, a lot of demonstrations planned. I've been thinking a lot about kind of, what is the role of peaceful protest, and especially in the context in which this administration is really kind of like flooding the zone of like, how do you even pick when you show up and how you show up and where you show up? And what can the role of protesting and demonstrating be beyond just like providing a focal point organization? And so I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about kind of like what you see the role of protest and demonstration being, and also if you have any kind of, just given your background, any practical advice for people who are increasingly looking to be out, showing up for their neighbors?
Yeah, I think mass public protest is crucial. Mainly in a situation like this where we are having what I consider to be kind of an authoritarian attempt at a breakthrough, fundamentally change American society. Being visible in your opposition, and so that other citizens see that opposition, is empowering and critical. So I see it as like a critical component of resisting and breeding courage within fellow citizens to resist the anti-democratic attempt here. That's number one. Sustaining it and having it be organized so that like you're recruiting, people who come to these. Like when I used to run for office, I would have like a couple volunteers being really aggressive with clipboards to get everybody to sign up. Now you can probably do that with an app or whatever, because you don't want to lose that opportunity to get people engaged, like on the, kind of on the next step, and organize and have forms of communication where you can communicate with people. It's hard to do that in mass protests that are organic, and that's why starting to develop organizations that can coordinate participation in these protests is also very important. Unions have traditionally played a really important coordinating role in that. That's why every authoritarian dictatorship in the world outlaws unions, because they are a source of decentralized power that can put people in the street in a way that you need. So, kind of reaching out to and coordinating with unions and encouraging their participation is also really important. Practical tips. Number one, if you run into any trouble, you should just call me. I mean that, seriously. You should call me or email me if you run into any trouble.
His phone's going to be going ding, ding, ding.
Yeah, well, that's what it's for. Like Shane said, that's what it's for. It's never off. But I think you need to have a plan about what your objectives are. So if you want to engage in civil obedience that may result in your arrest, that you need to plan and communicate to kind of law enforcement or crowd control who's there. Hey, this is what I'm intending to do as a form of civil disobedience. If you're not, and you're there to kind of listen to speakers and march and hold a sign, I think just kind of being very aware of your surroundings and where the permitted areas for protests are, and I think that's probably what you should be doing. Under no circumstances, though, should we feel as if just showing up to a protest, we're putting ourselves at risk. We cannot allow ourselves to be chilled in that way. We just can't.
We had one this year at the Capitol. Last week it was the teachers union, and it was civil disobedience, 10 were arrested.
Yep.
But it was a huge crowd, and it just made the press, and it was a statement.
Yeah, I mean, this is what we do in this country. Like, there was a long period of time, I think, where we kind of had not flexed those muscles of protest. But this country is a history of protest. That's what it is. And so we shouldn't feel like self-conscious or bashful about showing up and exercising our responsibility. That's a critical form of citizenship.
Good one.
Yeah, right.
We're going to do 2 more, and then we're going to finish. Susan and Nathan.
I'll just add to that protest planned this weekend, which is the No Kings protest. There are over 1,800 across the country and around the world. There's one in Windsor at 4 o'clock, so come on down.
Town green.
Okay, Nathan and then Amelia last.
Just two quick points. The teachers that protested and to the point of getting arrested, Leslie Blato is the president of the New Haven Federation of Teachers, and she and some of her colleagues got arrested at the governor's office. Was inspiring to young people because days and weeks later, the students of New Haven walked out and marched in protest. I think maybe it had more to do with immigration than financing, but anyway, I think that she was setting an example for the students. And the organized protest, April 3rd or 4th, was a rainy day, and my wife and I had a union meeting actually out of town, but my wife and I weren't really in the mood to go to Bushel Park and stuff. But we later in the afternoon, we said, let's do it. And we came down to Broad Street. I would have been happy if there had been 9 people, okay? There was, I don't know, 150, 300, something like that. Clearly, folks from out of town, which I think is interesting, that Windsor was seen as a destination to come and line up and protest. And so I just want to give a shout out, as Susan said, for 4 to 6.
And it was organized by a young woman who had never done anything political in her life. Never anything. And it's been very overwhelming, but she did it, and it was pretty awesome. Amelia.
Yes. What I'd like to say is the effectiveness of our unions is something else. Because now we are learning that you don't have to stay in your state fight for either blue or red, whatever. But the thing is, they've gotten together now so that there are organizations that reaches all across the nation. Okay? And because of this, we know what you want, you know what we want, and we're generally looking for the same thing. So the how, who, know what, why. But the thing is, I think Jane will attest to the fact that the union picked her up, and she picked us up, and now we're always chasing after her. And sticking by her side. And she is not just known just here, but she's on the American Alliance for Retired Americans. She's a part, she's not really a part of joining, but the thing is, she's a part of them because of that. They know her, know much of the things that she's doing in our state, because what we do is we don't just stay in our state. Wisconsin needs somebody to help them, to train, whatever it is, go to Wisconsin. And we often go down to Washington and go pull up all our Democrat leaders together, ask what's going on, what can we do, how do we help? And we come back and say, Jay, what do we do? What are you going to do? Help us and tell us, and then we're going to chase them after.
Now you know I should my favorite
We even sometimes forget to include our neighbors, which are right here in our state next door. But I believe that's what our artists, the Windsor Dems are working on. And they said we need something more than just Windsor. So but we just have to, as someone said earlier, talk to each other.
Yes.
We gotta talk to each other. And when something good on our president, or the Connecticut Line for Americans, they have meetings, northeast section, south, east section, Hawaii, etc. Talk to each other. That was one reason why Reverend GPO how it got passed on the Congress. Because people were fighting, and a group came together throughout the whole nation and made it work. And it hurt us in a way, because for a while they were saying, where are they going to get the money from? Because they thought if they got their money, back then Social Security. But that's the way we see it.
Thank you. I want to say thank you to the Windsor Art Center, Mayella. I would be remiss if I didn't say, because I'm always talking about how it takes the team. Well, here at home, it takes my friends and all of the news that turned out today, but also my husband. And my sister Carol. And thank you, Karen. It's been like a real pleasure working with and all of you will continue to turn out. May not be as exciting as Cincinnati, but
It will be more exciting. Come back.
I want a picture of you guys with everybody behind you. Okay. You can stand up or sit, whichever way you want to do it. No, you gotta get in the middle. Get in the middle. I love her.
Stand up.
Oh. Karen, get in there. Show how you've connected us. Awesome. And raffle time.
Thank you, Chris, for your support.
Okay, Mike, you're picking only one number, so shuffle it up when you get in there.
Round 2, get the bottom one too.
Today. All right, ready everybody? Get your tickets. Last four numbers, 6, 4, 4, 7. 6, 4, 4, 7. Come on, somebody had to win that. 6, 4, 4, 7. Someone has it. No 6, 4, 4, 7. Okay, Mike, do it again. No time for slowness. Ready? You're a little late there, girl. 6, 4, 8, 0. 6, 4, 8, 0. Come on, people, look at your tickets.